So 2 weeks ago, we looked at a bad relationship, and we saw a bad decision between twin brothers Esau and Jacob. We called it the Bad Parenting Hall of Fame. Um, Today, we're going to call it the Bad Parenting Hall of Fame Part Two, because we're looking at exactly the same people who do something very similar, but on an even worse level, out of Genesis chapter 27. So the last time we saw them, Esau had sold his rights as a firstborn son to his younger brother Jacob for a pot of stew, right? One of the worst trades ever made in history. But that's not where the deception by Jacob, the scheming by Jacob to take what is his brother's away from him. The first one you could blame Esau for somewhat for it. In this one, all you're going to feel is sympathy for Esau and anger at Jacob, and not just at Jacob, but at mom too. Let's take a look at it. Chapter 27, verse 1. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat so that I may give you my blessing before I die." This is a sad but very sweet moment between a father and a son. We established already a couple of weeks ago that Isaac loved Esau, that Rebekah loved um, Esau, and yeah, Jacob. It is Jacob. I was going to say Jacob, and it sounded wrong, but no, it's right. Esau and Jacob. That Isaac loved Esau, that Rebekah loved Jacob, that they were playing favorites of their sons, which is never a good idea for parents to do, but they were doing that. So Esau calls his favorite son, who is also his oldest son, who is the one who deserves the birthright and the blessing from the father. He's already given up his birthright, but there's still a blessing that the fathers would give to their sons that would give them kind of a leg up in life. So it's this sad but sweet moment where he calls his son and he knows he's about to die. And he says, "Would you go hunt something for me? Prepare it the way I like it. I'll eat but what might be my final meal, and I'll give you my blessing." So um, it's an interesting and beautiful thing. But before we actually go into this story, which is pretty much the last story we'll see from Isaac, um, it's interesting to note that for all the amount of time, for all the chapters in Genesis that we've waited for Isaac's story to start, by the time it starts, he only gets a couple chapters. Like as a kid, that's really part of Abraham's story. But when he becomes an adult and his own story starts, it's only a couple chapters and it's over. Isaac gets very little going on here. In fact, here's the first little note for today. Isaac's life serves a short but pivotal role in the story of salvation. Um, he does little more than marry Rebekah and give birth to Jacob. That's pretty much all he does, and then makes a couple of mistakes along the way. But he does those two things. And here's the deal. God calls all of us to do different things. And there are times when we look around and we see some people who seem to be doing all kinds of things for God all the time. And we wish, wow, I wish I could be that, like an Abraham, like a David, right? And then we look around at our own lives and we go, am I even doing anything of value here? And most of us are Isaacs. We're people who there may not be much written about or said, but if we allow God to use us, we can play a pivotal role in the story of salvation. We can play our part. We can do what God calls us to do, and we can make a difference in that. Isaac does very little. There's very little written about him as an adult, but the role he plays is essential. It has to happen for the story to carry on, and he does his part. And God does this a lot throughout the Bible and throughout history, throughout our lives today. He will use very small moments as hinges in history where something turns. If Isaac had not played his part, then the entire rest of the story of the Bible would be different. So he didn't do much, but he did what he was supposed to do, and it meant a lot. So let's continue with his story here. Chapter 27, now verse 5. Now Rebekah was listening to Isaac listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die.' Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies." Talk about the Bad Parenting Hall of Fame and the Bad Marriage Hall of Fame. I mean, and the Bad Person Hall of Fame. She overhears this sweet moment of an elderly man about to die who wants to eat, maybe for the last time, his favorite meal cooked by his son and then give his son his blessing. And her thought isn't, oh, how sweet. I wonder how I can help. Her thought is, how can I deceive my own husband and my own son and cheat them out of what they want to do and involve my other son in the plot? It's horrible. So if Isaac's life is a short one but pivotal one, or a short story but a pivotal moment, Rebecca's life is a cautionary tale about how a good person can be ruined by bad choices. And think about Rebecca's life. Her story started so well. The servant, right, traveled to find a wife for Jacob, for his master's son. He goes to this well. He prays to God. I want a woman who's going to show her generosity by not just offering to give me water, but to water all my camels, which was an extraordinarily big task. Rebecca comes out and offers to do that, and then willingly says, yes, I will leave here and I will go to this foreign country and marry a man I've never met because I really believe God is in this. She is a woman of extraordinary courage and of extraordinary character. So what happened? I don't know. Maybe Isaac and Rebekah started up by not getting along, and then it got worse, and then they ended up making bad decisions, hurting each other. We don't know. We don't know. But as we talked about earlier, in the first point of deception a couple chapters ago, when Jacob took Esau's birthright, well, it wasn't even deception. It was just a bad choice on Esau's part. Esau had some blame. You could blame Jacob for trying to take something from his brother instead of trying to help his brother, and I do blame him for that. But in this one, so far at least, and all the way through the story, we'll see it. There's no fault on the part of Isaac or Esau. This is Rebekah, and she makes a bad decision, and then her son, unfortunately, doesn't stand up and go, wait a minute, I'm not going to do this to my brother or to my father. We're going to see what his reaction is, and it's not good either. We continue on, chapter 27, verse 11. Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, but my brother Esau is a hairy man. So his problem isn't, we shouldn't do this. His problem is, this is going to be hard to do. How do we figure this out? But my brother Esau is a hairy man while I have smooth skin. What if my father touches me? Like, it's going to be hard to deceive dad. Okay. I would appear to be tricking him, and he would bring down a curse on I would bring a curse down on myself rather than a blessing. So his problem isn't, hey, it's wrong to deceive dad and my brother. His problem is, I'm going to get caught, and then I'm going to get in trouble. If your only motivation for not doing the wrong thing is that you might get caught and get in trouble, then that's not the right motivation. It will not sustain you, and it doesn't sustain Jacob either. Verse 13, his mother said to him, my son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me. So Jacob goes, oh, okay. So I've got a free pass. I can do this and I won't get in trouble. All right. I'll do the wrong thing if I'll never get in trouble. Oh, that is just so much the wrong motivation, right? Verse 14, so he went and got them and brought them to his mother, them the goats, and she prepared some tasty food just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered, and remember when we're talking older and younger, we're talking twins. Esau was born maybe seconds before Jacob, right? Okay. 16, she also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. So he goes to get the goats. They kill the goats. They prepare food to make it taste like wild game. And then the fur from the goats that they have just cooked to deceive Jacob, to deceive Isaac, they put that on his arms. Okay. So that he's now got furry arms. Then she handed to her son Jacob the tasty food and the bread she had made. So this is some next level nasty behavior, deceiving a blind old dying man who just wants to bless his son. And this is what happens with evil. Evil gets compounded when we involve others in our deceit. So Rebekah has this scheme, but she has to pull her son into it. And because of that, he now is evil. And now she says, I'll even take your curse upon me. So she's doubled the curse upon herself. She's involved her son, and her saying the curse comes on me doesn't relieve him of the curse for having sinned. It's the sin, the person who sins, they're the one who has to pay the penalty for it. So it just, evil gets compounded when we involve others. It's even legally, this is true. At this point, legally, this has become a conspiracy. And even today, in our modern legal system, if you conspire to do wrong, the penalty is much more severe than if you do wrong by yourself. Because even legally, we recognize that a group conspiring to do wrong is a higher level of evil. It's one thing to behave badly when nobody's looking. It's much worse when we bring others in. And she doesn't just bring somebody else in, she brings her son in to deceive her other son and her husband, his father and brother. It's right. It's about as bad as it gets. Plus, Jacob, by now, he's a grown man, right? He's not a kid. He's been married for a while. Okay, he was 40 when he married Rebekah, and they've been married for a while. He's a fully grown adult man. He should be able to say no, even to mom. He should be able to say no. This is the wrong thing, but he doesn't. So, story continues in chapter 27, verse 18. This is Jacob, went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" The Lord your God gave me success," he replied. So Isaac's suspicious. He may be old, but he's not stupid. Verse 21. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near me so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not." He knows something's up, or he suspects it. Verse 22. Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is not the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And I want to know at this point, just how hairy was Esau? I mean, goat skin is not like, thick, but it's pretty hairy. I mean, Esau's got to be, wow. Okay. These are the hands of Esau. Verse 23. He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he proceeded to bless him. "Are you really my son Esau?" he asked. This is the second time. "I am," he replied. So now Jacob has lied twice. Then he said, "My son, bring me some of your game to eat so that I may give you my blessing." Jacob brought it to him and he ate, and he brought some wine and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, so he did this intentionally. I got to smell the guy. He blessed him and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed." So he's really suspicious. He asks in several ways to confirm this. And the deceit is strong enough that they can trick a dying old blind man. Good for you, right? You've tricked a dying old blind man. This is so sad. This always makes me feel so bad for Isaac because, well, here's the principle for this one. It's a gross sin to prey on the vulnerable. It's a gross sin to conspire with others and make them sin, but it's a horrifying sin to prey on vulnerable people. Of all the principles in Scripture, there's so many that are absolute. There are some that are confusing, and we often get in debate over those more than we should. But there's a lot of principles in Scripture that are just really essential. And one of them is God is on the side of the vulnerable. God is on the side of the broken. God is on the side of the weak. God is on the side of the people who are hurting. And he gets really, really angry when strong people prey on vulnerable people. That is as certain a through line of a biblical principle from the beginning to the end as you can get in the Bible. God hates bullies. He hates people who prey on the vulnerable. He doesn't like that at all. And then you got to ask yourself, what are they doing it for? I mean, Jacob already has full legal right to the entire inheritance of the firstborn, which means he's going to be head of the family. Basically, the entire family is his. What is he wanting to get? He's wanting to get the blessing. So what's the blessing? Let's take a look at it. Here's the blessing. Chapter 27, verse 28. "May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." I just love reading that out loud. It's just so beautifully said, isn't it? So what is this? What's the blessing about? In that time, a parent was believed to be able to grant blessings to their offspring that would in fact have a spiritual and real power to change the outcome of the rest of their lives. We today look at that and go, "Oh, that doesn't really happen that way." And yet, in a minor way, not as much as they expected, but more than we expected, it actually does. If you speak blessing into your children's lives, they're more likely to live in a blessed way. If you speak cursing into your children's lives, they're more likely to live in a negative way. We really do have the power of the tongue, especially over those that we have authority over our children, especially. So, um, anyway, so why is this a problem that he blessed Jacob? Is he not able to bless Esau as well? Can't he just bless good fortune on both of them? Well, this was limited, as we'll see as we continue. Now, chapter 27, verse 30. As Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, "My father, please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." His father Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" "I am your son," he answered, "your firstborn, Isaac." Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." When Isaac heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me too, my father." This is just so sad the way it plays out, isn't it? Verse 35. But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he has taken advantage of me. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." One thing that's really important to understand is that Esau is a man of his word. Even though he realized he made a bad bargain, soup for his entire birthright, he's like, "I made the bargain. I'm going to live by it." You got to hand it to Esau. Verse 36. Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob?" Oh, sorry. Verse 37. Oh, no, in the middle of verse 36 now. He's taken my blessing. Then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I have made him lord over you, and have made all his relatives all of his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?" Basically, I've given him everything. Esau said to his father, "Do you have only one blessing, my father?" Right? That's a question that we've got that we already asked. "Bless me too, my father." Then Esau wept aloud. His father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck." He says, "I've already put your brother over you. I can't change that. You're going to live under your brother. But what I will give you is that there will come a time when you will break his yoke. You will be free." So the first deceit over the stew was as much Esau's fault as Jacob's. In fact, it wasn't even a deceit. It was just bad decision on Esau's part. This one is all on Jacob and Rebekah. It's not on Esau. He did the right thing. It's not on Isaac. He did the right thing. He's an old man who was tricked. So why can't he bless both of them? That's just the way they believed it worked back then. So continue on. 27:41. Esau held a grudge against Jacob. Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob." Yeah, I'm not the right response, but I get it, right? Verse 22. When Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, so he's mad enough that he's telling people he's going to kill him, right? She sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is planning to avenge himself by killing you." Here's my question. How did they not see this coming? Right? Anyway, verse 43. "Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran." Remember back when we found Rebekah and we talked about her brother Laban? I said, remember that name? This is why it's going to come back again in the next couple chapters, right? For a big chunk of the story. Verse 44. "Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides." That's going to be a long while, folks. "When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him," he's never going to forget, right? "I'll send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Then Rebekah said to Isaac, "What do you mean lose both of you?" Well, she's lost Esau. Esau's no longer going to trust mom again. And so she wants to preserve Jacob's life at least. Then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living." I can always hear Scarlett O'Hara with her back of her hand pressed against her forehead. "My life will not be worth living," right? Yeah, Rebecca's a charmer, all right, isn't she? Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And you notice she goes to Isaac, and the excuse, because she's got to come up with an excuse why Jacob is running away. So her excuse is, I don't want him to marry a woman from here. Uh, so Jacob, we got to send Jacob away. Um, so what's the final lesson out of this one? Deceitfulness always costs more than it's worth. So Jacob and Rebekah, quote unquote, won, but Jacob got all he wanted. Rebekah got everything that she wanted him to get, but at what price? Right? One son has the inheritance, one son has the blessing, but the other son now hates her. The other son wants to kill her other son, and if she doesn't get him out of there and lose him, so the son she loves the most now has to live away from her, or he'll be dead. And the son that's going to stay hates her. Okay, you won, but there's your price. Because when you win by deceitful means, the price is always higher than it's worth. Deceitfulness always costs more than it's worth. And yet we have to keep learning the lesson, don't we? Until it happens to us, until we live with those consequences, most of us don't ever learn. That's one of the reasons I think the Bible tells these stories, even the warts and all stories of its so-called heroes, is so that we can learn these lessons and go, if you can learn from this story not to do that yourself, then it will have served its point. All right. All right. Now, starting next week, the story is going to shift to Jacob. That's pretty much the end of Isaac. He's not dead yet, but his story really comes to an end at this point. The entire story shifts to Jacob, his run from Esau. We will see Esau again, but only as a short part of Jacob's story in a few chapters, starting next week. So we've had this long time of concentrating on Abraham. We've had this very short time where Isaac and Rebekah have been center in the story. And now we go for a very long time where Jacob and then Jacob's sons and a whole bunch of amazing stories happen out of this. So starting next week, the story shifts. And I love the stories of Jacob and his sons, especially of Joseph, right? There's so much of that, and coming eventually by the time the book of Genesis ends, to one of the most famous stories in history, one of the ones that a lot of movies have been made out of, and everything else, right? The slavery in Egypt, the freedom from Egypt, the Ten Commandments, right? We won't get to Ten Commandments in Genesis, but the setup of that story will happen by the time we're done with this book. So that's where we start heading into that, really close to that right now. Hope you'll be back for that next week. Stuff is really, really getting good. We'll see you then.